All right, so hi everyone. My name is Blaine Ashley, and I'm the founder of New York Champagne Week. We are in for a treat tonight for a taste of terroir through rosé colored lenses. A bit of a mouthful, but we love the name. And we're especially excited to have Erik Segelbaum, who was Food and Wine Sommelier of the Year in 2019 with us tonight, leading this tasting. Erik was also awarded a 40 under 40 Tastemaker for Wine Enthusiast this last August, and he's a founder of his own consulting and events company, Sommelier. So Erik is going to be an excellent educator and host and moderator for tonight's event. In addition to Erik, we have Eugene Engel here with us tonight, and Eugene is the sales and marketing manager for all of the champagnes you have in front of you this evening, and as well as Carbon, which was a Grand Cru add-on for tonight's experience. So thank you all so much for coming tonight. We want to have this fun, tasting, interactive conversation. Feel free to pipe in questions, comments into the chat, and we will all just have a great time tonight. So I'll let you take it away, Erik.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to see, frankly, a lot of friends here. I'm not going to lie. So this is fun and exciting. For those of you that are willing and able, I would highly encourage you to turn on your videos. You know, we're in the hospitality business, and part of that is interacting and being with people. I would love to see your smiling faces. More importantly, I have done so many digital classes that I've gotten really good at reading tiny little cues of body language that say, whoa, Erik, slow down, you're going too deep, or hey, maybe dive a little deeper. There's a raised eyebrow there. So would love to see your smiling faces. If that means that a bunch of you are scrambling to find pants now, sorry, not sorry. But really would love to see if you're comfortable. That said, this is, I'll tell you a couple more things. First of all, I'm going to monitor the chat as we're going. This is a small enough group. At any point, feel free to come off mute and ask questions. Everyone but Garth, who will rake me over the coals with my with his champagne knowledge. But no, seriously, any of you, please feel free to either come off mute and ask questions. If you want to signal us, you can do that. You can type in the chat. I will monitor the chat as we go. Additionally, I am the only human on the planet with my name. In the chat are all the ways you can reach me if you have follow-up questions, if you want to know about stuff, if you want to tag myself and, of course, New York Champagne Week, please feel free to do so. Yeah, by all means, you know, I know most of you, so that's kind of cool. I think my contact information is pretty useless there. But by all means, please feel free to reach out after this event if you want to share your comments, if you want to talk more about any of the cuvées that we tried, if you have any follow-up questions. Look, here's the thing. There's no way to make you experts in the terroirs of Champagne in an hour. It's just not possible. So the goal of this is not to be a boring scientific deep dive where we talk about, like, you know, something that you'd expect out of an encyclopedia. Oh, we can do that if you want, but I think it's more enjoyable to have sort of an engaging and interactive study session. And I can tell you, as a sommelier, all of my studying has been separated from my drinking. And what I mean is, okay, yeah, I'm studying Barolo, maybe I'll sip on a Barolo. But when I'm studying the crus of Barolo, I don't have 15 Baroli open next to me and like, okay, I'm reading about Serralunga d'Alba, I'll taste that. I'm reading about Canubi Boschis, I'll taste that, right? We don't do that with anything because that's not really easy. Here we have a really cool opportunity because you have, most of you have the champagnes with you. So when we're talking about the Côte de Blanc, you could taste a cuvée that's based on Côte de Blanc Chardonnay. When we're talking about the Montagne de Reims, when we're talking about the Vallée de la Marne, you can really not just hear about what makes these appellations or these broader regions special, but it can coalesce in the bottle. And I don't think I've ever heard of a champagne tasting that was based on rosés. People generally, don't use rosés to express terroir. But in conceptualizing this event, when we were talking about it, when Blaine and Eugene and I were figuring out what could be a really fun and engaging and unusual way to really dive into terroir, we thought, you know what, we can say a lot more with these rosés. And my original idea was I want 3 wines that are almost the same assemblage and almost the same dosage. So it's like the only factor is the terroir. But I really like the idea here that these are not the same blend, not the same assemblage. And we'll go through what the percentages are so you don't have to guess. And I think that is an even better expression. So it's not like we did everything the same, but from a different region. It's we did everything in a way that highlights that region, that magnifies the terroir, that expresses the grapes that do best in this part of Champagne. So for me, this is going to be just an absolute ton of fun. I think you all know where Champagne is. Next year, we'll work on doing this in person in Champagne if we can. But just in case, Blaine, do me a favor, make me the host or the co-host, and I'm going to share my screen with you. And it will be the only screen share of the night. I just want to sort of give you a quick map and a calibration of where the heck we are. You better know that we're in France. If you don't, you're in the wrong class. No. So here we are in Champagne. And, you know, really, there are 5 major regions of Champagne. Tonight, we're really not going to talk about the Côte de Sézanne and the Côte de Bar or the Aube. It's not that they're not relevant, they're relevant. It's not that they're not important, they're important. But A, based on the 3 wines that we have, the 3 producers that we have and where they're based, and B, in talking about like the galvanizing expressions of Champagne, where we're really going to focus is respectively in the Montagne de Reims, the Vallée de la Marne, and the Côte de Blanc. So, you know, again, you've probably all seen this map. I'm sure a few of you in the audience have it tattooed on your arm, but ultimately, this is what we're going to be sort of talking about. Also, I would not expect you to wait for me to drink. Let's not do that. You're all adults. At least I hope you're all adults because this is a Champagne thing. So I have decided, much like any of you who are fans of Watch What Happens Live, we're going to have a word and all of the panelists are going to know it. So anytime anybody says the word champagne, you drink. So champagne, 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 champagne. Here's to you. Enjoy. It is a pleasure to have you here. And if you're ready, strap in. Let's go on a little journey, shall we? So let's kind of do a little exploration. You saw where we are in a map, but what does that really mean? So I think one of the most pervasive misunderstandings about Champagne and about Champagne terroir is one of my favorite C words, and that is chalk. And there's no question that chalk is an important part of Champagne, arguably one of the most important parts. But what I think people don't realize is that it's not all chalk. Now, I happen to have found this piece of chalk in Champagne. Note the secret drinking word. And yes, it really is chalk. Like I don't know if you can see that, but you can like blackboard with this stuff. This is specifically from the Côte de Blanc. That's where the chalk is. What people don't realize is that the other major terroirs of Champagne are based on clay for the most part in the Vallée de la Marne, and sort of clay and gravel in the Montagne de Reims. Now, I'm not saying there's no chalk in these places, but for those of you that are wine geeks, you probably know the difference between how clay retains water versus how gravel doesn't, versus how chalk does and doesn't at the same time. And so you can kind of infer that like not all vineyard parcels are really created equally. And a lot of people tend to, I think, maybe misassociate the terroirs of Champagne because of chalk and think it just like completely applies unilaterally across the board. And I don't know, Eugene, what do you think about that? Do you find in your experience that people are all like, oh, Champagne is chalk is Champagne?
Yes and no. It depends on which Champagne they're speaking about, but definitely, you know, when you're in the southern area of Côte de Blanc, you can visually see the chalk through the valleys. As you, one eye glance full is you can see all the filler is all white chalk, where as you get into Vallée de la Marne and into Montagne de Reims, you see that there's the presence of clay, which, you know, Meunier and Pinot Noir definitely flourish and love the clay soil, and Chardonnay, really demands the chalk. It really flourishes in a chalky environment.
So thank you. You just wrote a perfect segue for me. No, we did not plan this, I swear. But I happen to have another rock, and this is also from the Côte de Blanc, and I don't know if this is going to come through on my tiny zoom camera, but I want you to see maybe the difference. Do you see the difference in that coloration? Can you sort of see that? Yes, no? This one's a little more brown. That's because this one is in the north, from the northwest near Epernay, almost into the Vallée de la Marne, and it's already starting to show some of the clay from the Vallée de la Marne versus this little specimen from Avise, which is like, boom, pure, brilliant white. So this is just like one of my favorite sort of in-person examples. And if you can't really see the subtleties of color, I guess sorry, but I just thought it'd be a fun little demonstration. So let's sort of dial in on that a little bit more. So Eugene, you started to speak about this already. The Vallée de la Marne is really the only home. Oh, by the way, I should tell you what order we're going to taste in. Frankly, it doesn't really matter what order you taste in because these wines are punctuation. Okay? You can still read the sentence without the punctuation. So don't feel like I can only drink the champagne that we're talking about now. Feel free to go back and forth, refer here and there. I'm confident that none of you are going to finish 3, potentially 4 full bottles if you have the Grand Cru Carbon in the time that it takes us to talk about all this stuff. So don't feel like you need to wait for me to cue you in. You can go back and forth and back. But what I thought we would do is sort of go through these on a geographical tour, but also on a stylistic tour. So the first champagne I'm going to talk about is the Paul Gorgue Rosé. And then we're going to move in to, that's Côte de Blanc. We're going to move into the Vallée de la Marne to Edouard Brun. And then we are going to move lastly towards the Montagne de Reims for the Paul Couronne. So if you want to play along, there's your order. But, you know, as my millennial friends would say, live your truth. So let's start then with the Côte de Blanc, because we talked about the chalk, and in the Côte de Blanc, oh boy, does the chalk matter. And to Eugene's point, for any of you that have ever been there, I'm sure you've seen, like, even along the side of the road, it'll take a little dip through like a cutout of a hill, and it's like chalk on either side. And you can just wander the vineyards and pick up, like, which is where I got these chalks. So Paul Gorgue is based in the Côte de Blanc, specifically in Vertou. So if you want to do some more map work, this is the only thing I'm going to show you is this map. We're just going to keep going back to it. Big thanks to Wine Folly for providing the imagery. So in here in the Côte de Blanc, here we have Vertou, sort of right in the center of it all. And it's just like, it's an absolutely stunningly beautiful place to be. If none of you have been there, the moment we can travel again, I very much suggest that you go check it out. But this is where Paul Gorgue is based. Now, I'll tell you that all of the wines we're tasting tonight are between 8 and 9 grams per liter of residual sugar, of dosage. So in that respect, all things are equal. So what you're really going to get out of these wines tonight is the expression of terroir through the blend of grapes. So Paul Gorgue is Côte de Blanc. As you can imagine, this is Chardonnay heavy. This is 85% Chardonnay, 15% Pinot Noir. No Meunier. Meunier doesn't really like chalk. I don't even know if there is any Meunier in the Côte de Blanc, but if there is, it's probably infinitesimal. Incidentally, we are going to skip over the other grapes of Champagne. You know, they represent what, less than half of a percent. So there's no Arbonne, there's no Vrai Pinot Blanc or Petit Melier in here. Not really worth talking about for the sake of terroir, because there just isn't enough for them to, you know, trying to explain Champagne terroir and talking about those varietals would be like trying to explain Napa Valley terroir as expressed through Charbonneau. It's like, yeah, there's some there, but it's not really relevant. So for all of you trivia geeks or somms that have studied all the grapes and want to be like, Erik, there's more than 3. Yeah, dudes, I know, but I don't think they really apply to this right now. So when it comes to Paul Gorg, again, being situated in the Côte de Blanc, having almost all of their vineyards in the Côte de Blanc. By the way, this is a Premier Cru Rosé. Eugene, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is some Grand Cru vineyard sourcing in this as well. Is that correct?
No, it's all
All
100% Premier Cru
Awesome.
with Paul Gerg. And you know, when we do rosé in Côte de Blanc, it's we're kind of out of the box because that's a Blanc de Blanc profile area. But we wanted to have a representation of rosé, and we say at the vineyard, this is a very Chardonnay rosé, and it definitely tells the expression of what we wanted to do, because at Paul Gerg, we not only do Paul Gerg in Vertu, but we also produce Champagne Napoleon and Baron Rothschild. And the Rothschild Rosé is the same profile as this. It's the same exact blend and cuvee. So that's where this rosé came from. It was originally a cuvee that we put together for the Rothschild family, and then we decided to put it out there with Paul Gerg, even though Blanc de Blanc is their expression. So I think it's a very good example of a rosé from Côte de Blanc and what can make a unique one that's different than what everyone else has out there. And as you taste the other two rosés that we featured tonight, you'll definitely taste the saltiness on the palate on this one, which is that heavy duty chalk, because you get a dusting of that chalk soil on the outer edge of the grape when we do our first press, and that gets mixed into the cuvee. So the first thing that I always taste and smell is that chalkiness, that almost saltiness on the palate.
So Eugene, I think you just once and for all settled the can you taste minerality debate. It was like, yep, because it's legitimately, or I don't like to use this word, but literally in there, right?
It's pressed to the juice. I mean, it's a part of the first press. Our second and third press are what we sell to our large maisons or cooperative houses like Moet or Taittinger or Piper, who are looking for Chardonnay base, but not necessarily where we're gonna let them hijack our first press.
Awesome. And one of the things to me that's striking about this is that, well, let me step back in the context of, I'll get to what's striking, but when you think about styles of rosé, that's where it ends with champagne, which I don't get. And you know, you're all here because you have an affinity for champagne, an affinity for rosé champagne, or why would you be here? So maybe for those of you in this room, it doesn't count what I'm about to say. But if you think about the average consumer, the average person, when we're talking about non-rosé champagne, there's much more of a focus on dosage. There's much more of a focus on assemblage of the blend of grapes, right? All of that stuff. For whatever reason, people just accept rosé is pink, therefore all rosé is the same. And I don't understand why that is, because consumers don't have that attitude with, you know, Champagne Blanc. It only seems to be a thing with Champagne Rosé. And I think it goes further because can you name any Champagne Rosés that are not brutes? I can think of like 2 or 3 extra brutes. I don't know of any Brut Nature or Brut Zeros. So I feel like, yeah, Garth, put your hand down. You don't count. Mr. Champagne Happy Hour over here in the corner. Right, but you know, maybe he'll agree with me that that's not common. I think the majority of rosé champagnes are brut. So in the minds of consumers and champagne drinkers, I feel like there just seems to be this like, okay, do you want a rosé or something that's not rosé? And then if we're not rosé, we can talk about Blanc de Blanc, Blanc de Noir, Extra Brut, all this stuff. But for whatever reason, the dialogue is like, it's pink. You want something pink? Oh, that's a bad example. That's not pink. There you go. It's pink. Do you want something pink? Okay, great. Let's drink something pink. For me, what I love about these 3 is you're going to taste 3 incredibly different styles of pink, 3 amazingly different styles of rosé. And I think that the Paul Gorg fills a little bit of a void. Look, we're all acid heads, and these are all high acid. There's no question. But that like what do I want with oysters? What do I want with salty charcuterie? What, like, these three wines are almost like a meal progression in terms of a differentiation of flavor, but also of texture. And I know you all know what texture means, but when you taste through these wines, I want you to think about the feel of skim milk, 2% milk, and whole milk. Because as I go from the Paul Gord to the Edouard Brun to the Paul Couronne, to me, it's like the textural feeling of going from skim to 2% to whole. And that'll make a little bit more sense when we talk about the varieties that are that are being used in these. But again, this is 85% Chard, 15% Pinot Noir, and it's like laser beams, right? It is focused but not lean, right? It is direct but not sharp. And what I just can't get enough of is just that chalky salinity. I think I can think of maybe one other rosé champagne that expresses like this. That's the Pierre Peters Cuvée de Rosé. Every other rosé champagne I've ever had doesn't showcase this like not even austere is not the right word, but this just like laser focused, like directed, almost like pointy if it were a shape in a very good way. Expression, and I applaud Paul Gord for producing a champagne rosé in this style, especially when probably, you know, a lot of the old guard would be like, what do you mean you're making a rosé in the Côte de Blanc? That's a waste of the Chardonnay. I would disagree. I think this is a beautiful highlight that is focused on the Chardonnay. So that's about as poetic as I'm going to wax about that. But maybe, oh, also, really, I mean, if anyone has any questions, feel free, throw them in the chat. Feel free to interject. We're going to move now on our journey, if no one has a question, into the Vallée de la Marne. So back to the trusty map that you'll get very tired of seeing by the time this is all over. So we have moved from Vertou in the Côte de Blanc. We're going to move now into the Vallée de la Marne to Edouard Brun. So here we are in the VDM, as the cool kids call it. And Edouard Brun is based in Aï and Marais-sur-Aï. So Aï right here, and also has vineyard holdings in Marais. So right around here. So just getting close. Really, they're like the Switzerland of you know, between the Montagne de Reims and the Côte de Blanc. Not the whole Vallée de la Marne, but where Edouard Brun is, right here in Aï. It's like you can turn around and throw a rock and hit Épernay, and if you have a really strong arm, you can throw a rock and get to Reims. But the point is, you're very close to both of the other terroirs. But still, the important thing here, where Edouard Brun is located in the Vallée de la Marne, is the Meunier. That is where Meunier is at home. However, in this particular cuvée, there is no Meunier. So I found myself asking, okay, why is that? You're in the home of Meunier, but why is it then that you have a lot of Pinot Noir and you have a lot of Chardonnay? And I think the answer is clear. I'll put you back on the map. It's because you're where the chalk soils are sort of expressing in to the clay, and you're where the gravel soils are expressing into the clay. And it gives you the opportunity right here in Aï to have beautiful Chardonnay that sort of is influenced sort of by the uplift terroir from the Côte de Blanc, and beautiful Pinot Noir that's sort of influenced by the downslope terroir from the Montagne de Reims. So even though the Vallée de la Marne is Meunier country, this is a really cool cuvée, you know, if you want to, like, you know, for all you wine geeks out there, because it's 50-50 Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. It is all of Edouard Brun's holdings are Grand Cru and Premier Cru, mostly based, as I mentioned, around Aï and Marais-sur-Aï. And interestingly about this, and Eugene, I'll have you talk about the fermentation a little bit more. So they ferment their Pinot Noir and their Chardonnay differently. The Chardonnay is stainless. The Pinot Noir, both for alcoholic and malolactic, is in wood. Eugene, you want to talk about that a little more?
Yes, and you know, also the aging, the time, because you know, getting back to Paul Gerd, they aged 3 years to get to that level of rosé, and the Edouard Brun we aged for 2 years. So the Edouard Brun, I actually had a sample of the crystals that grow in the bottom of the barrel or form in the bottom of the barrel when they use the base wine barrels for aging. And it's a really unique, it's almost like a small sculpture of the color of almost rosé that they have is a little darker, it's a little richer. It has this creamy texture to it. So not that saltiness that you would get from the Paul Gerg, a little bit more of a strength of Pinot Noir that you feel on the palate and you see in the color of the wine.
Absolutely, thank you. So there are a couple questions that bear recognizing. Firstly, Khadija, that analogy. So I don't know if you saw this in the chat. She typed, "A Côte de Blanc is to Champagne, a Saint Gris is to Sauvignon Blanc." Awesome. I think that is a brilliant and perfect analogy. Requires the person receiving that analogy to know what Saint Gris is and where it is. But I think that is a beautiful, beautiful way to explain it. And every time I'm ever talking to a somm again, I'm gonna use that. So thank you for letting me borrow that. Naomi, I can't answer that question, but maybe maybe Eugene can. Naomi's asking, is the Pinot Petit Pinot Die?
I'm sorry?
Naomi was asking, is the Pinot in the Edouard Brun, is it Petit Pinot Die?
That I don't know. That would be a question for Emmanuel at the winery.
Well, you can get me the answer to that question, and I can shoot it over to Naomi and Erik.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, I don't know. So, thinking about texture for a moment, by the way, not that it's necessarily relevant, but founded in 1875. So I'd say they're not a younger house and they're not an older house. They're sort of a Goldilocks of how long they've been around, like sort of just right. But you really, I think, feel the texture more on this, as Eugene was saying. And like, I put these in sort of like, how would I progress a meal? So like I said, the Paul Gerg would be like oysters, charcuterie. Now, maybe I'm into the like either fish or poultry course if we're doing like super classic French. And I think about this, in fact, when I was previewing these wines for this event, the Edouard Brun, I was feeling very fall. And a good friend of mine had just harvested chanterelle, and morels, which grow wild all around Virginia. And so he'd given me this big bag of freshly harvested morels and chanterelles. So I did like a roasted quail with like a chestnut and morel and chanterelle stuffing. And I popped this Edouard Brun with it. And I have to tell you, like, look, we all know food and wine pairings. A lot of things work with a lot of things, but this was like, oh damn, like, and I think just I don't know why it worked so well, but it worked really well. And I think part of it is that Pinot is seeing alcoholic and mallow and oak, and that's just helping inform the texture especially. But this is just such a fun wine for me. Liz, you're asking about if any of these red wines have still red wine blended into them or Coteaux Champenoise blended into them, or are they macerations? So Eugene, the Paul Gerg and the Edouard Brun, are those pure macerations or saignés? I know
No.
they.
Paul Caron, the next one we will taste, has 33% Meunier and 14% of it
Right.
is still base.
That much I remember, but I don't know if
not the two that we're tasting now. There's no base wine at all. It's all
okay. So they're press maceration.
correct.
Excellent. So Liz, you segued this beautifully because, as Eugene mentioned, the Paul Caron, which time to pour some, pardon me. So the Paul Caron is in fact, it's, if you really want want them all, it's 27% Chardonnay from the Côte de Blanc. It's 26% Pinot Noir from the Montagne de Reims, and it's 33% Meunier. 14% is Coteaux Champenoise Pinot Meunier. So still Pinot Meunier from their base wines from the Vallée de la Marne. So I chose to, we could have done these in any order. I chose to do the Paul Couronne last because of two reasons. One, on the texture build, this is a wine for grilled meats. This is a wine for steak. This is a wine for lamb. I'm sure all of you have no problems pairing champagne with meats and with dishes that the average consumer would attribute to red wine pairing. And I think this shows it beautifully. So let me step back and say, so Paul Couronne is based in the Montagne de Reims, 1887. So again, you know, they've got some maturity to them. The majority of their vineyard holdings are Grand Cru vineyard holdings. But what I love about this is really all three terroirs expressed together. Their Meunier is coming from Vallée de la Marne, Pinot Noir from the Montagne de Reims, and Chardonnay from the Côte de Blanc. And, you know, it's, you know how we always, like, I think most of the people here are somms, or at the very least have studied wine. So you know how we like to get really romantic? We like to get all sexy time and wax poetic about how, oh, well, you know, it's really the non-vintage, the house style, the base wines, how you can blend 40 or 50 or 60 base wines across different vintages that gave very different things and sort of hit on the same style, you know, sort of year in, year out, all of that. We love to get all sexy time about that, right? And I agree with all that. But what I love particularly about this wine, about the Paul Couronne, is it's not, to me, about their house style. It's about, we are going to take the best of the three major terroirs of Champagne, and then we are going to express those as best we can. But we're also not going to forget about Côte Champenoise. So it's, you know, I think, now again, this, don't like fact check me on this, because I'm not making this assertion as truth. But I don't recall ever hearing of another champagne house that will use it to make their rosé that is using Côte Champenoise, that is using still base wine to help craft their rosé, that is also using that same varietal in the assemblage of the sparkling cuvée. Now, I could be wrong, I could be mistaken, but in all my champagne studies, I've never seen, okay, our rosé is 30% Chardonnay, 70% Pinot Noir, but 20% of that Pinot Noir is Côte Champenoise still rosé. I've never, ever seen that. I've never heard of that. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I am by no means the authority on champagne, but I just think it's really sexy what Paul Couronne does. It feels like, to me, they're attacking, okay, attacking is the wrong word. They're focusing on terroir and on blending and on all of the elements that come together in champagne, and sort of like, it's almost like in the Venn diagram, they're like right in the center of terroir, of winemaking, of, you know, the various ways that you can get to rosé. So everything sort of converges in the middle. And I gotta say, this is a pretty delicious convergence zone. Also, champagne, champagne, champagne. So Eugene, I know you've had a, you know, extensive experience with talking to the winemaker for this. So is there any kind of poetic waxing that has been expressed to you about the approach to the way they come to this rosé, the way they come to this blend?
You know, Jean-Baptiste is a very particular individual, and he's very proud that the holdings of the Meunier that is used in this particular cuvée are right, almost adjoint to the Dom Perignon Abbey in Auvelay, in the Pearl of Champagne, which is kind of symbolized to him because of his family being in that area and growing up and acquiring this property from the Couronne family and carrying on the tradition of a grower style champagne where they're very unique, very small, very particular. He's never in a rush to do a cuvée or to assemble something. And he's actually awaiting his first 100% Meunier, which is becoming very trendy now for other winemakers in the area that know how to manipulate and tame the Meunier grape, because it is the most highly acidic of all the three major grape varieties. And it's a nice change to see that philosophy where someone's ready to stick their neck out on the chopping block and almost put themselves out there and take that challenge, where a lot of other champagne houses won't do that. They want to stick to the tradition of what they've been doing for forever, basically, and not step outside the box like that. So I admire JB for doing that. I love the fact that he has the sentimental, feeling. When I met him, I met him at the Dom Perignon Monastery. We were both praying on this project together, and we just missed each other by about 5 minutes.
Eugene, would you mind telling the group who Jean-Baptiste is? I will say very briefly that Jean-Baptiste Provost was one of the reasons I started New York Champagne Week. He reached out to me in 2012 to host a tasting for brands he was trying to clear to get distribution in the US. And he took me around Champagne for my first time ever in 2012. And then Champagne Week was born in 2013. And he was working on Paul Caron in 2012 when we had first connected, I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, how ironic, huh, Blaine, that you and I have the same experience almost with him like that. And,
so would you mind telling everyone how these wines are connected to this gentleman and how they got into your hands and finally into distribution in the US market this year?
When I was in Champagne, before I even went out, I'd go to Champagne twice a year to check on a lot of our holdings. And when I was going to go out my last trip with my wife a few years back, he saw that I was a member of Côte de Champenois, and he reached out to me on Facebook and said, would you be interested in representing Paul Caron? And I said, well, I would have to visit and taste the wines before I could give you that answer. And then after meeting him and realizing, who I had in front of me, then he introduced me to his other luxury brand, which was Champagne Carbon, which at the time I thought it was a very cheesy name until he explained the whole project to me and the relationship to Bugatti and all, and what they were doing. And again, they're in the Pearl Champagne in Champignon, and they have this location right next to the Royal Champagne Hotel, and they're just such an influence in the region that to go around with them, it was great because everybody knew them, and anybody who's anyone in that area of Champagne, the respect level was just ultra high. So I love working with him. I love working with his wife, 16. They had a beautiful salon right near the Cathedral Notre Dame. And I think the style of the Champagne is just very different, very focused. And I just love the fact that there's a majority of Grand Cru in most of the SKUs, which is very hard to find at the price point. To get that value at that price point, you just don't find that every day. So for me, it's a win-win-win to be with Jean-Baptiste and Paul Caron and with Carbon. They're just great houses.
Yeah, Eugene, you bring up a really good point. We didn't talk about the price points of these, but every single one of these wines that we've had tonight is at the very least mostly or fully Premier Cru and or Premier and Grand Cru. But they don't track price-wise like other houses do. And I think, look, we all know how expensive champagne is to make. And we all know how expensive the land is. I think it's a testament that, I don't want to say this, it's not just that they're good values, which they are, there's no question about it. I think it's a testament to the fact that I sometimes feel from some houses, and let me be clear, I'm not like picking on like large negotiators here, even growers, even small negotiators. I sometimes feel like the use of Grand Cru or Premier Cru fruit is only done to charge a premium, but they don't necessarily really express that fruit as well as they should. It's just like, oh yeah, it's Grand Cru. we can charge more. And what I really appreciate here is that it's Grand Cru and Premier Cru, and they can charge more, but they don't. And it's all about these are the appropriate grapes to express this wine, not these are the appropriate grapes to make us a bunch of money charging the premium that we can because we're using those now. So I don't know, for what it's worth, as obviously we all care about value, right? I just think that's just like a really cool sort of sidebar to this. Also, I'm curious, I never asked you this question. Is Jean-Baptiste related to Jerome Prévost?
Prévost is a very popular name in France.
I know.
So I would have to ask him that, but I like the fact that you just mentioned what you did about price points, because for me, these wines over deliver for their price points.
100%.
They really bring something special, and that's why I was very excited to be involved with this, to expose these wines on a national basis to people that normally wouldn't have the access to even know what these properties were. And for me, it's a challenge to expose them, because the big houses are always the main focus with marketing and what people in the champagne world expect from champagne, and they don't know that these little gems exist, and unless you were really to get on a plane and go over there and find them, like I did. My idea was to find a different house in every region, and I will have one from Côte d'Ivoire very soon next to Monsieur Drapier, and I will have the complete gamut of almost every major region that I can possibly represent, and have something boutique and unique, which is what I was looking to bring aboard. So I wanted to thank you and Blaine again for letting us be involved. For us, this is special for all these champagne houses. When I contacted them and told them what we were doing, they were super excited.
I mean, this is exciting for me too. You talk about the marketing, and it's like, well, look, we all know that the big houses have the budgets, right? And that's great. So for me, I immediately feel like they're not the money they would be spending on marketing, they're instead spending on quality. And I certainly really appreciate that. Again, especially as rosé cuvées at these price points and this level of quality, I want to be very clear with everyone. Most of you know me, I'm not afraid to speak my mind. If I don't love something, I'm not going to be emphatic about it. I'm going to skip over it. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, so this is this, it's made of that. Okay, let's move on. I really do think that there's something special going on here. And I used the word in describing this class as 3 iconic producers, because I think that they are iconic. Not because they're the most popularly known, we know they're not, but because they are if you think about the term icon, what is a religious icon? It's a figure that is meant to express and represent a religion, right? These are champagne icons because they express and represent their respective region. So I just think for me that's really cool. So again, you guys are doing a really great job. It's almost as if you read my outline for how this is going to go with your questioning, because Rana was asking about Meunier, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about Meunier. First of all, we mentioned that Meunier finds its home in the Valley de la Marne. And it's not just that there's clay soils. By the way, an easy way to remember, Meunier, clay, right? Clay, Meunier. So that's an easy way to remember that. But it's also because the Valley de la Marne, just based on the geography, and it's a valley, so what happens to cold air, it settles in a valley, is very frost prone. And Meunier is frost resistant. And if any of you have been to Champagne, and I know at least 2 or 3 people on here that have been there during a harvest, if you've ever harvested in the Valley de la Marne, really in the morning, good God, your fingers are frozen. You get ice crystals, sticky ice crystals. It is so cold. So it is vitally important to have a varietal that is not just okay with the water retention of the clay soils, but can also handle and resist the frost events that happen pretty regularly. So it's Meunier's hardiness that is really cool. And like Eugene, I haven't ever really tracked this, but if I was ever going to become an MW, which I have no plans to do that because good God, do I not have the time to start studying again and writing a dissertation and all of that stuff. I've already decided that I want to track if I ever do this, and you know, hey, maybe Karen, if you want to have some fun and you know, and write something else, to track the perceptibility of the character that I associate as weedy in a good way, like dandelion, not like stemmy, but like the dandelion sort of weedy notes that Meunier can sometimes pull through in relation to frost events in either the vintage or the base vintage that makes up the majority of the cuvee. Now, I know that is super geeky and super granular, but I've come to this hypothesis that I have not even begun to try to prove empirically or otherwise. But one day, if I can find some time, that the cooler Meunier vintages lead Meunier into the sort of dandelion, arugula, watercress side of things, and that the not necessarily warmer vintages, but the vintages that don't see frost events kind of tend to steer Meunier into like the strawberry shortcake, pomegranate, cranberry side of things. And if any of you, Garth or Karen or Annette or any of you experts in this room have a thought, or Eugene have a thought on that, I would love to hear it. But one day, let's have some fun and try to track that. At least it would be very delicious research, if nothing more. So feel free to chime in if you have a thought. But otherwise, Rhonda was sort of asking about Meunier's popularity. There's no question that Meunier champagnes have really taken off in popularity. In fact, yesterday, one of the New York Champagne Week events was Meunier Magic with 3 different, I believe they were all grower champagne from Meunier. So Rhonda wants to know why are people choosing to make singular champagnes from Meunier? I have some thoughts. We're going to have to wrap up in about 4 minutes. I have some thoughts. I don't know if this is what the answer is, but I think we've seen a trend in wine consumption from consumers and wine purchasing and sales from sommeliers into the interesting, the unusual, the different, the less common varietals. You know, we won't even talk about the natural wine situation, but there's definitely been some sort of a let's focus on the different and the unusual and the interesting, not on the normative. My belief would be that might be why. My other belief is that there's been just more research, more precise clonal and massal selection with Meunier, and people are really starting to see what Meunier can do when you let it be the leading actor rather than the supporting actor. But Eugene or anyone else on this panel, does anyone have a thought on that?
Is Karen and Garth on here?
They're both here. I don't know if they want to talk, but Karen, any thoughts to put you on the spot?
Hi, Annette. By the way, we were just talking recently. Hi, Erik. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Blaine, for inviting me. I don't know. My thoughts are, I drink a glass of champagne every night of my life and have for 20 years. I consider it indispensable to marriage and the source of all patience. Good if you're in your own business, right? I jumped on late. I apologize for jumping on late. So these are 3 producers I don't know well and wanted to taste. I'm thankful to New York Wine Champagne Week for presenting them. So I'm sort of thinking about them. I think before one gets down into a rabbit hole, so sorry, Erik, but the rabbit hole of weedy dandelion and watercress, I mean, that's pretty tunneling pretty deep. I mean, I think one of the things we should think about is what is compelling about this wine? Why should you drink it? Why would you say to yourself, I can't wait to get home and open a bottle of this? So I'm only just now answering that question for myself because, again, apologies, I jumped on late. But, you know, champagne has to be lit from within. It has to have an extraordinary vibrancy that almost nothing else has. And so that's what I'm thinking about right now, trying to take some notes, journalism. Yeah, I'll just turn it back over to you, but I'm pleased to be here and thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Karen. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. First of all, that's beautiful. Champagne has to be lit from within. Can I quote you on that?
You better buy attribution, big guy.
Not only that, but listen, I think you're so eloquent. I think you should consider writing for a living.
Oh, thank you. I'm taking it up next. That's the next thing. Yeah.
So I didn't want to put you on the spot, and we do have to wrap up because there's another New York Champagne Week event, the Terrior Ladies event that Blaine needs to start and can't do while we're in this room. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but I think that the intent.
What about the Bugatti?
Oh yeah, we've got to talk about carbon. The intent there was less about like Meunier being in this particular cuvee and just in general about the new Meunier. We do have to wrap up. I thank you, Eugene. I almost forgot about our ground crew add-on, the Champagne Carbon. Eugene, you've got 1 minute to talk about Bugatti's Champagne Carbon, and I think a few of you have bottles, so by all means, now is the time to pop them. I'm certainly going to pour mine. You mentioned it a little bit, but give us another minute on it before we regrettably have to close this out, and take it away.
Carbon is a unique project. It's the House of Douvray in Champignon, and is a blend of 90% Chardonnay and 10 Pinot Noir, aged 15 years. Is a 2002 vintage for the 110th anniversary of Bugatti, who are our partners on this project. We'll be opening a restaurant in combination with them at the Royal Champagne Hotel. And we are the official champagne of F1 racing on the podium. Although this year we skipped F1 because no fans in the stands due to COVID. But we're also the official champagne of Bugatti Autosports. And this is just a really unique example of another trend besides Meunier, which is old vintage champagnes. So, you know, to get a 2002 at this level, a lot of love. You have to sit on your harvest for 15 years plus before you're released to the public to get to this level. But I think once you taste it, it's beyond there. It's a luxury champagne that definitely belongs in the same level as P1 or P2 or Don Ruinart. You know, maybe not as famous as Don Ruinart, but we hope that the vintage speaks for itself, being that old. And we're putting wine in reserve for these special carbon and Bugatti packages. So the packages are gorgeous. It's real carbon fiber. It's the same carbon fiber that they use for the cars from F1 and from the cars that we make at Bugatti. And I hope those who did participate or get it really enjoy what we put to get to the point where we're at, because I'm super excited whenever I taste this. I'll be in Palm Beach on Friday doing a Bugatti event at the Wellington Polo Club, which is a private event for Bugatti. And when I taste the champagne that night, I know that I'm going to wake people up to something special.
Absolutely. I just want to highlight, thank you, Eugene. I want to highlight, in case you missed that, the Elevage is 15 years, Sir Tiraj, 15 years on the lees, which is insane. It's rare that I taste something and my response is, holy shit, but holy shit. This was my first time tasting Champagne Carbon just now. Wow. So If you
Excellent.
didn't do the Grand Cru add-on, do yourselves a favor, track down a bottle of Champagne Carbon. You can email me and I can tell you how to get it. I hate to do this, but we have to end so that Blaine can start the Laurent Perrier ladies event. Thank you all so much for joining. Enjoy your champagne. Enjoy New York Champagne Week. Feel free to reach out to me and we will talk soon. Take care. Bye-bye. And thank you so much.
Something.